Well, seems like that might have worked. Apologies for the late start, guys. Rather frustrating, obviously, when the technical side of it isn't 100% working, but I did warn you that this was going to be something of an iterative, experimental procedure. So just hold on 1 second. I'm clicking on a load of stuff here. Whoever would have thought that there could be even the slightest problem coming directly from the shed cam. Right, let me just check. I've got a few buttons to click here. Yep, YouTube's telling me the stream status is good. I'm going to click up here to see if this works. That works. I'm huge. I'm small. If anybody is able to see this, I need to do an audio check. Obviously, I can hear myself. What I need is for you just to jump on either YouTube, on the chat, or on the Discord, and I need you just to tell me whether you can hear what I'm saying. If you can't hear what I'm saying, you're going to have to try and understand this via sign language. So anybody who's out there, do chime in, because it's going to be a bit of a weird one for the next couple of hours if you're literally just watching me move my lips around. Yep, we've got a couple of people here on Discord saying it looks good. I don't know why I'm typing thanks, but now you've got an idea what the delay is at least. Right, so obviously I'm not at the uni today, so thank you very much for tuning in. I'm sure you can imagine why I'm not at the uni today. So because I'm absolutely sick of hearing about that, we're not going to mention it once, okay? As an experiment, today is going to be hopefully something that's going to work. The goal for what I'm going to be doing is, you guys have seen almost certainly some of my graphics wizardry videos in the past. They've been shot here in the shed. And rather than doing just another video where you guys can just click and follow along, I wanted to do a live. And the goal with this one is to be able to replicate the experience of, hold on a sec, I'm just talking to you, nothing's happening. There you go. That's why it goes big. Is to replicate the experience of doing a normal kind of session. So you guys who are used to seeing me at the university, obviously normally we're in GS318 or whatever, and I can cast what I'm doing up on the screen and come around and look at what you're doing. So that's great, except if we're not all in the same location at the same time, then it's going to be harder to do. So, excuse me, there we go, safety cough. What I need you guys to do, ideally, is not just watch along today, because this is going to be a slightly slower paced one than the normal graphics wizardry one, because the goal isn't for me just to steam through and show you and then you guys follow along at a later date. What I want you to do is to load up this YouTube stream on your second screen. So that's going to be your phone, or if you've got a tablet, or if you've got another screen, somebody else's PC, and you're going to follow along here, so that you've got YouTube running somewhere where you can see it, and at the same time be running on your other screen, your main PC screen. You're going to be using Photoshop, because we're going to be going through a bunch of different Photoshop techniques, all in service of one particular goal of making a particular visual, but it's going to be kind of an exercise to run through some stuff. But what I'm not going to be doing is just steaming through at full speed. What I want you to do ideally is to be able to step by step follow along, and then at the end of this process you guys will hopefully be able to have some kind of result that you'll be able to show me. Now, some of you guys, I've got quite a few followers on YouTube for the Graphics Wizardry channel, will just be following along on YouTube. You guys, if you're not students on my course that I teach at, obviously you're more than welcome to do that. But what I've also got, if you guys are in my third year group, we've got the Discord channel, which I've got on my other screen just here. And hopefully you guys will be able to ask any questions on there, so I can split them out from YouTube content. The other thing that Discord lets us do is, if you have Discord running in browser on your PC, you can screenshot what you're working on, so that if at any point you have a question, you can screenshot, just copy and paste it directly into the Discord, and I'll be able to see it. If you get stuck, you can ask me a question in there. I'll pause what I'm doing for everyone, and we'll be able to just run through it quickly. If it absolutely, you completely no idea what the heck is going on or something catastrophic has happened, then what we can do is you can use the Discord channel to call me, and you can share your screen with me, which is why we're using Discord. So if you guys aren't on the Discord channel and you want to be on the Discord channel, if you go on the Product Design 2017 group on Facebook, obviously my link is on there. I think Kieran emailed the link out yesterday. You guys can click on that. That link is an invite to the Discord channel, okay? It's not a public Discord channel. It is just for you. Obviously, if you are not a member of the Discord channel, if you're a non-university member of the public, and you still have a question, I'm not going to just cast you guys out into the wilderness. I want to produce something that's going to be useful, because the likelihood is if you're thinking, how do I do this, then somebody else is thinking it as well. So if you ask that in the YouTube chat, then I'm going to keep an eye on. I've got everything open on my screens just here. It's like NASA. You can't see it, but it's super exciting. And hopefully I'll be able to catch up with that, and we can go through and explain everything there. So if that makes sense and anybody's playing along, I don't know whether anyone will. I know students are often reluctant to get involved in this way. I'm going to switch over to Photoshop now. Let me just click on this button here. There we go, lovely. So there we go. Yeah, so anyway, YouTube on your second screen, Photoshop on your PC, Discord open in browser behind Photoshop, lovely. So what we're going to be running through today is a method for doing a particular style of rendering. We're going to keep it nice and simple. Well, hang on, wait a second. No, each individual thing that we're going to be doing today is going to be simple. But hopefully we're going to get a very complex and sort of rich outcome at the end. Sorry, Atticus has just asked, will it be published after the live session? Yeah, this is one of the things that's quite nice about this, that's beneficial versus just using me turning up and doing the lecture in person. Because of the way that YouTube works, if you want to follow along afterwards, all of this content, even this bit at the beginning where I'm just talking to for like 10 minutes, will be stored by YouTube, and it will be accessible via the usual YouTube channel, if that makes sense. So we're going to be using the pen tool, we're going to be using some layer effects and layer styles, and we're going to be creating something that looks quite nice with this. So we're going to be using all of these techniques to design and sort of render out in Photoshop a new frame for a bike. So I think this might be something that one or two people have been through in the past, but I'm going to approach it. So basically it's something that we'll be able to follow along today. What I need you guys to do is to open up your web browser before we go into Photoshop, and we're going to go into Bing, and I want you guys to search road bike. Now, obviously, Bing is the butt of many jokes because Google is the king of search. But if you're going to be using an image search, I talk about this quite a lot when we're in the sessions. If we're going to be using the image search, I've typed in road bike on Bing just here. Now, the benefit of using Bing versus Google is this is something Google image search used to have. If you scroll up to the top, you see where it says filter just here. If you click on this, you get an extra set of image options here. And the one that I want to click on is the one on the far left, image size. Whenever you're working on something like this, you want to make sure that you've got a good high resolution image to work with. So we're going to be using an image of one of these bikes as kind of like a backdrop for the creation of the artwork that we're doing. Because if we're just designing the frame, and if you were a bike manufacturer, you maybe would be just designing the frame. It doesn't mean that you have to spend ages drawing and designing the handlebars, saddle, wheels, gear set, chain, all of this sort of stuff. So we're going to find a bike that we're going to be able to use for this. So I want it to be extra large in terms of resolution. So this is what's nice about this is regardless of whether you're going to use one that's extra large, each one of these images now, if you look, has got a little marker on it that says what the resolution for that image is. So what I want is a bike that is isolated, so it's got a white background, it's from the exact sort of from the side, and I want to have one that's a real nice high resolution. So that means that we've got stacks of detail everything's going to be nice and crisp when we bring it into Photoshop, and there won't be any kind of mismatch in terms of how crisp the bike is versus how crisp the frame is. So this one here is quite nice. I'm going to click here. Make sure that this is a full resolution that we're bringing in. That looks good. I'm just going to copy that image. I'm going to go into Photoshop, File, New. Now, what's nice when you've got something in the clipboard in Photoshop when you start a new file is we've got all of the random sort of standard file sizes, for standard photo file sizes, standard print file sizes, all of the ISO page sizes. But if you're on recent, the first one is clipboard, and it literally gives you a document that is the exact same size as the artwork that you've just copied. So if you remember, we had this artwork in Bing that was this size, 1912 by 1177. So I'm going to click Create. We've got a blank document, Control V to paste that directly in. And now we've got our bike in place. Let's get rid of this. Now, this is good, this is fine, we're ready to rock and roll with this. The only thing that I would do is I want to make sure that we've got some breathing space around the outside of the document. Because it can be visually annoying if we're butted right up against, wait a second, we're going to point out, this white bit just here isn't very big. I don't think that's very convincing. Anyway, this white bit here is not very big. So you want to make sure, just for my sanity's sake, that we've got a bit more white space around the outside. So I'm going to go to Image, and I'm going to select Canvas Size. Now, there's a difference between image size and canvas size, which I'm not sure if we've covered before. So image size is obviously going to be the size of the image. And if you resize the image, then what happens is it resizes the actual content for the image. So if you had an image that was 10 pixels by 10 pixels and you resized it to be 100 pixels by 100 pixels, that image would now be that big. What I want, instead of scaling this up to a different size, is to add a border around the outside. So I'm going to select canvas size. Now canvas size, when you change the size of the canvas, doesn't affect the pixels that are on that canvas. It just creates space around the outside of them, or if you reduce it, it will crop into them. It won't scale the image. So for what we want, I'm going to click on this one, canvas size. And you can see here, we've got all of this content just here. So I'm going to increase this, so we've got another 100 pixels on each side. So we'll go up to around about 2100 here and about 1400 here. What's nice about this now is that we've got this little setting just here, and this shows where the image is going to transform from. So if we did it up here, it would add 200 pixels top and bottom. If we click down here for the origin of the transform for the canvas, it would be 200 pixels top and left. So instead, I'm going to click on the center here, and what that will make sure is that we're going to have the 100 pixels all the way around the outside of the whole thing. So click OK. All good. So we've got a much more space around the outside. Just for being a faff, I'm going to fill that with white and then flatten the image down. Control E, if you guys remember, on the keyboard. So now we've got a nice white space around the outside. I'm going to rename this layer Photo, because as you guys know, I'm obsessive about making sure that the layers are all named properly. Okay, let me just click a couple of times over here. Yep, that all looks like it's working. I'm just double checking because in parallel with worrying about the artwork, I'm just double checking that the stream is working correctly. Right. So we're kind of ready to go with the bike now. So what I'm going to do is to draw a new frame over the top of this frame. In order to do that, I'm going to use the pen tool, which is just here on the left hand side. Remember, if you click P on the keyboard, you get the pen tool. Now, if you're using Photoshop, it's quite possible that by default, paths is going to be nested behind layers. Because paths, if you remember, is where it stores all of the path sets that you create using the pen tool. Now, because we're going to be working with paths and layers simultaneously, I always hate having them nested one behind the other like this, because this is kind of the default. So I'm going to drag the paths down. If you don't have channels, you can drag it down to the bottom. You'll see this little blue line appears. You guys see that? And I can let go and it will nest it there. Actually, what I want is for it to be just in front of the channels just here, so I can have them all open simultaneously. Always when you're working in Photoshop, make sure that Photoshop is laid out the way you want it to be. So you're only using the panels that you need, because what you want is for the artboard to be kind of as big on the page as possible, so that you are on the artboard focused on that. So even things like I've got by default the rulers open on the page, because something that I was doing before I needed to check the pixel size for, I would click Control R and get rid of those, so I can get rid of them. Now I kind of need all of the chrome and settings around the outside. Otherwise I would click F on the keyboard and then maybe F again, depending on what setting I'm in. So you guys remember that you can cycle through those three modes: windowed Photoshop, Photoshop full screen, and Photoshop with no panels or anything. So I'm going to work with it like this for now. I'm going to make sure that I've got my paths just here. Now, before I start working with the pen, I could just click and start. What I want to do is make sure that it's not going to just set it as a like as a work path, because what I want to have is I want to make sure that I've got something that I can come back to later. So I'm going to click on the bottom here, create new path. I'm going to rename that bike frame. Okay, now the thing is, what I don't want to do now is I don't just want to steam ahead, because once I start clicking with the pen tool, I'm pretty fast with the pen tool. You might be slightly slower, so I don't want to just lose anybody. So if, first of all, I'm going to just wait a second, and there's a delay for the feed, so I'm going to have to wait until somebody answers this. Just look like I'm staring into the middle distance. But is anybody following along with this? If not, then I can steam ahead, and then you guys can cycle back and track it. But if you're following along, then if you say either in the Discord window or on YouTube, and I'll be able to know more or less whereabouts in the process we are. So if you're following along, just just drop me a yes. If you're not following along, but you're watching and you're just keeping notes, or you're keeping track of what's happening, just join in and say, just keeping track, just watching, just following along mentally rather than in Photoshop. Okay, because ideally the point of us doing a live like this is that you guys can feedback and I can hopefully keep track of everything here. So I've got Amelia on the Discord has said got it, which is, I'm going to say, is slightly ambiguous. Yosho's just watching, that's cool. Just keeping track, that's good. You guys, like I said, because this is going to be recorded, you'll be able to hopefully watch this one back and make sure. So anyway, I've got my bike frame path set just here. And what I'm going to do, I'm not going to agonize too much over how it looks. If we were doing this as a real project, at this point, you would already have like sketched this out and have an idea in your head about exactly how you want it to look. So this is going to look slightly rough and ready. But I'm just going to start working around the hard points of the frame. So for example, we've got the hard points that don't change unless we're radically redesigning the whole bike, would be this steering stem column just here, the point where the saddle goes down, obviously the point where the wheel fixes, and where this gear is. I was reading yesterday, this is apropos of nothing, about an innovation in the shape of this gear just here, which I found quite fascinating, which is that a lot of cyclists now, instead of having a dead round gear, have a gear that is very slightly elliptical, because a round gear transfers power continuously in exactly the same way at every point in the rotation. But because of the way that your biomechanics of your legs work, the power isn't equally distributed as they go round. So a lot of the cyclists now, top cyclists who do gravel climbing and stuff like that, will have an elliptical gear that's very slightly off round, and it cancels out the power difference of the different positions in the cycle of your legs. There you go. So there's still, it feels like there's not a lot that you can do about these sort of core parts of a bike, but there's still innovations to be made. So I'm going to start drawing now. I'm going to try and just basically create something that covers this up, just not necessarily because you would, but I want to just make sure that it's all nice and easy. Now, when you're working with a pen tool, you guys remember that I've said this before, if you want to make it look nice and smooth, you have to use as few a number of points as possible, but no fewer, otherwise it can look a little bit clunky. So I'm not tracing this, I am just using these hard points here, and then I'm going to try and create a new shape that's got a bit of a different flow to it. So this is the very outline of the frame. So we've changed how the flow works just here, so it sort of comes around a bit more smoothly. It still hits this point just here. What I'm going to do is to add in the sort of counters, these empty spaces in the middle. And you see that this gear, the sprocket in the middle, I'm not going round that. We'll be able to mask that out in a minute when we've created the actual frame itself. Let me do something a bit weird here. So I'm just adding an extra point in just there. Remember, if you guys hover over the line with the pen tool, it lets you add a new point in. If you hover over a point, you can see that a little minus appears next to the cursor, and it will let you remove that point. So I'm just going to add in a point just here because I want to pull the curve out a little bit. So I'm sure that this bike frame is going to look weird as heck. You can see that we've got it here. It's a bit sort of gigery, a bit like organic with this weird counter just here. So I'm going to make a new layer in the layers palette by clicking the new layer bit just here. I'm going to rename this frame. I've got my HSB colour up here. I'm going to set this to 0 saturation, 50 grey. Just round that out because it looks a little bit weird. So with the bike frame selected here, foreground colour is grey. Now, watch what happens. Because of the way that this setting is set, sometimes it will go the wrong way. So what I've got to do is you can tell from this that the little thumbnail here, maybe make that thumbnail a bit bigger if I can, that it's set wrong. So sometimes if you've got this white around the outside and the grey here, what I need is exclude overlapping shapes from here. So I've selected the shapes in the path using the A selection tool, and I need to make sure that up here at the top on this control panel here, the control bar, it's set to exclude overlapping shapes. So now we've got grey around the outside and white on the inside. You can see that it's knocked out the shapes here. So make sure I've got my grey in the foreground colour. I'm going to hit fill path with foreground colour. So now instead of just the wrong bit being done, we've got this set here. Now the reason why I mentioned this and it has set like that is because quite often when we're in class, when I see people do this, they'll, for whatever reason, somehow it's got set like that, the layers have got set like that, and they click the button and everyone in the session gets this, the frame looks great, and then one person has it go wrong through no fault of their own. Something's happened in Photoshop, the Photoshop gremlins have got in there. So that's what you need to pay attention to. It's actually, every now and again, it turns out to be something that's useful. Most of the time, that setting in Photoshop is just a pain in the arse. But if you know that it's there, that's how you change it, then we can hopefully correct it. Right. We're going to set something up now that is going to be useful down the line. Okay? It's not especially useful now, but it's going to be useful down the line. So if you're following along, what I want you to do is duplicate that layer. I'm going to call it frame for transform. I'm going to create a layer underneath, fill that layer with white, then merge them down. So we've got one layer with white and then this grey on. Actually, having said that, don't merge them down now. I'm so flipping distracted by having the stream running on the other screen at the moment, so forgive me if I jump to the wrong point in this. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 other screens running up here, including 2 versions of the stream, both of which are running out of sync with the actual screen that I'm working on here. So just apologies for that one. So we'll get there. So before we merge these down, we've got frame for transform and we've got our white layer just here. Okay, so this is something that's important for what we're going to do. I'm going to click on FX. I've got the frame for transform layer selected. And I'm going to click this button here. It says inner shadow. So we get this little window is going to pop up. And you can see there's a slight shadow inset into this grey shape just here. So what I want to do is I want to ramp the opacity of that inner shadow up to 100 so that it's very dark. I'm going to pull the distance down to 0 and I'm going to increase the size so that the shadow is smooth across the whole surface like this, so that some sections obviously that are large like this, I want this to be, imagine that the bit that's black is the sort of the side of the frame and the bit that's grey is the front of the frame, and so that represents the transition. This will make sense. Okay, later on when we come back, this is going to be, it's going to make sense. Just take my word for it. So hopefully you have got something looking like this. Now a couple of people I think are following along. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pause for a second. If you're following along, follow along. And when you've got to this point just here, then what I'd like you to do is just click on either the Discord or on YouTube and click yes, if that's okay. because like I said, it would be very easy for me just to just scream off ahead, and make it very frustrating for people who are following along. Got Beak New Tech on YouTube, just watching for the moment because I don't have Photoshop yet. I guess good luck with that. One of the things that I've seen that's quite interesting recently is if you are Amelia's here. If you're a student, you're going to have to Google this one. I'll find a link and I'll post it on the Discord, and when I've finished, I'll do it on the YouTube channel. If you're a student at, I guess, a qualifying institution, then Photoshop, because they are encouraging everybody to remotely work like this, they want to make sure that not only, obviously, I've got the CC because I'm a professional. If you guys don't have access to the software at home, I think that if you've got the right kind of like email address and you can register for it, you can get access to the CC, the Creative Cloud software, for free until May the 31st. So Adobe have made that software available. Their goal is obviously for you guys to learn how to do it once you're in an educational setting, so that when you go out into the real world and you're working commercially, that will be your go-to, that will be what you know how to use. So it's in their interests for everybody to be learning the software. So Adobe, send me a free version of the software. I'm helping. Okay, we've got Amelia, Charles F. Good to see you, Charles. Have said yes, that's good enough for me. We're looking like this. I'm going to flatten that down. So we've got the frame for transform and layer 1. So remember, if you click on the top layer and click Control E, it will merge them down. Forgetting that it takes the name from the one at the bottom. So we've got this now. It's a flat layer. Tim says, I miss your tutorials. Tim, bud, you don't have to miss your tutorials because you're in one now. It's happening. So we're going to save this now. So go to File, Save As. I'm just going to save this on my desktop. God, I hope there's nothing untoward on this computer that you're going to see. Anyway, look, there we go. So I'm just going to call this one frame for transform. Should have set that up beforehand. And click Save. Right. Now this has to be a PSD file that we're saving it as, because what we're going to do is we're going to use that, what we've just created, with the blend of the blur around the outside. We're going to use that as the basis for a texture deformation later on that is going to look peng, guys. Hopefully, if it works. So let's just forget that for now. We've got, get rid of that frame for transform layer. Don't need it. We're going to go on frame just here. What I want you guys to do now, when you've got the frame layer here, is click on F, X at the bottom to add a layer style. And this time, we're going to have this setting, bevel and emboss. Now, what bevel and emboss is going to do, previously it added a shadow in, this shadow inset into the thing. But bevel and emboss essentially creates a bevel around the outside of the shape. So you can see from this that we've got a whole bunch of different settings here. Again, we've got our size, which is the size of this. So if obviously it just looks like it's a flat piece of MDF or cardboard painted grey for this. And as you increase the size, the rounder it becomes until it becomes just way too round, rounder than the actual shape. So what I'm looking for is a sort of compromise point like this. I'm going to make sure that I've got inner bevel set. I'm going to set technique to smooth. For now, make sure you've got these settings like this. This is something that is super useful, and I recommend working through and looking at a load of different settings. The only reason I know how to do any of this stuff is because over the ridiculous amount of time that I've been using this, I've clicked around and I've looked at all of the different settings. So smooth for this. Depth is basically how strong this is. So if it's 100, 1,000, it looks like this ridiculously hench shape, which may be what you're after. Soften can control how soft that is. You can pull this down and it makes it look a little bit less sort of aggressive and segmented. So you guys are going to have to find the right point for this. Tim in YouTube says, I'm watching with my interns who also have to be your students, and I told them you were the Don of Photoshop. Thank you very much. Wait a sec. I doff my cap to you. Now I'm the Don of Photoshop. It's official. Hello, Tim. Hello to Tim's interns. Appreciate you tuning in. Hopefully this will be useful for you guys. Once we've got this set, we're just going to find a setting that we think looks nice. So that's the top section here. Depth, direction up and down. So it depends whether you want it to be beveled up or whether it's curved. It's obviously up. So it may be that you want one that's quite sort of aggressive and curved like this. The other thing that we can set is what the angle for the light is. Now this isn't especially important for this, but sometimes when you're using this you might want to adjust this so that you're getting a real close match to your the lighting on the bike. Because this is a studio shot but it's isolated, there's not a huge amount of sort of lighting differentiation in terms of where the light's coming from, so it's not that necessary, but sometimes this can be useful. And also, well, I won't go into global light, just take my word for it, it's going to be useful. So you guys are going to have to make a judgment call about where you want the light to be coming from. You can see that if it's up at the top straight, then you get some shadow at the bottom and some light here. The more you pull it down, sort of the more you're looking at the highlight. So I'm going to increase the opacity of the shadow. I think that that looks quite nice. I think that that way that the lighting works across here, it does look like a sort of a three-dimensional glossy surface. So I think that that's going to work. It looks nice for what we're going to work with, and it has a good kind of feeling of sort of a glossy light. So I'm going to click OK on that. Now, because it's a layer effect, it stays live. So that's not a flat piece of artwork now. That is a like a live layer effect. So it still applies across the layer. And if we needed to change it, to change where the light was coming from or how it works, then we would be able to do that, and it would apply it because it stays live, which is perfect for what we want. So what I wanted to show you just doing this straight away is that we've now gone from a very flat frame outline, which just defines the silhouette but nothing else. We've now got a very nice, not only three-dimensional shape, but also there is an element of some kind of textural information, because it sort of has got like quite a nice glossy sheen to it. I think that looks really nice. Do you think that looks nice? I think that looks nice. So hopefully you guys who are following along have got a similar kind of result to this. But it's just, I mean, it's just great. It's not that exciting, and it doesn't have a huge amount of textural information. So what we're going to do is I'm going to show you guys how to add that information in. But we need to save this document so that we can maybe come back to it later on. You guys, even like the pressure on my computer to not crash now is ludicrous. So if I just click Control S, it would save this as a Photoshop document. But don't do that, because I need this Photoshop document, frame for transform, to be the one that we saved earlier with the frame with the white background. So click Control Shift S on your keyboard and save it as frame 3D or something similar like that. So we've got those two documents now. So hopefully that's okay. Now, again, I'm going to put a little breakpoint in just here, so that if anybody's following along, and I think a couple of people are following along, then you just hit me with a yes in one of the many channels that we're on. Let me just take a second to see whether there's anything on my zipper. That's good. Cool. Still, I'm gonna hang here for a second just to make sure that this is all working. In fact, if anybody is following along, whilst you catch up, if you can get to this point here when you've got the save point, there's a heater in the shed at the moment. So when I come in the morning in the shed, I'm not being facetious, I'm literally in a shed. It's freezing cold, so I have to put the heater on, and then we get to a point like now, and it is flipping sweltering. So if you just bear with me for a second, I'm not going to disappear, I'm just going to switch my heater off so that I don't melt on camera. Back safe. Okay. Charles F. Yes, sir. Good. I don't know if anyone's still following along on Discord, but so what I'll do is I'll very slowly start with the next part. So if you have caught up, if you're following along, what I want you to do now is we're going to add a texture onto this bike. What would it be good to have as the bike texture? If you go again onto Bing and search this free carbon fiber, okay? Free carbon fiber. And what we're going to do is I'm going to show you guys how to make a tiling pattern, or how to create a pattern. At some point in a later session, we'll do how to make a tiling pattern from something that doesn't by default tile. Carbon fiber is by its very nature a repeating texture. So this is one of the easiest things to make a texture out of. So let me just pull this window over here. So put free carbon fiber into your Bing. And so what we're looking for, guys, is we're looking for an okay resolution texture. Now, I'm going to I've put all in there. Let's put medium, so at least we've got the image size up. So what I want to have is I'm looking for a texture which has got a non-terrible resolution, because we're going to tile it, but I don't want it to have a gradient across it. So these ones here, so this image here, this image here, this image here, have got gradients across them because they're supposed to be used for graphic elements for designers. Whereas what we want is we want to use it as a texture that's going to tile. So obviously if you've got a tiling texture that's got a gradient across it, it will look a mess. I say obviously, just see, it's obvious to me because I've done it before, but you just have to trust me on this one. So we're going to find one that doesn't have a particularly strong texture across it. That was a bit too much texture. This one, that's very small though, and it looks duff. So let's just click through, see if we can find one. That one looks quite nice. No, what? They look fine on the small. What's going on with that? It looked fine on the small screen. Right, let me scroll down. This one looks pretty flat. So what I want is one which has got, not necessarily there's a big file, but it's got lots of detail for the actual weave, for the texture, so that it's kind of obvious when you look at it what it is. Well, that's slightly annoying. I did actually find one earlier on that looked really good, and I can't find it now. Let's try large. That one's not bad. That one's not bad. Let's see. No. 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 Make a repeating section out of that. What the heck is that? It's just numbers. Okay, that's not even carbon fiber, so what are they doing labeling it that? Right, however you do it, what I want you guys to do is to find carbon fibre weave. Nah, that one's okay. So we searched for that one. I searched carbon fibre weave. It turns out that's the best thing to search. Carbon fibre weave. Great. So you're just going to literally copy that. Control V, paste it directly into Photoshop. Now, first of all, that texture is not the correct size in terms of the weave, because no one's going to make a carbon fibre with like fibres that big. It probably wouldn't work very well if you did. And second of all, it doesn't cover the whole of the bike. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set this to overlay for the transparency mode. It still looks quite good though. And I'm going to scale that image down until the weave of the carbon fibre is the correct scale. So I think that that's about right for that. So now we're even worse. The image is way, way, way too small. Okay? Let's just set that to be normal. Sometimes that makes it pop a bit more. No, that's not what I want. That's fine. So this is okay. I mean, it's a photographic texture, which you guys know that I like a photographic texture. But it's the wrong, I mean, it's the right size in terms of how big the weave is, but it is not correct for, it doesn't like, it's not just that bit of the bike that's made out of carbon fibre, so this is what I'm driving at. So, I'm going to set this to normal so that you can see the whole thing. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to select an area of this that will tile. So what I'm going to do, obviously it's a repeating section, so I'm going to start, I mean, you can see the pixel grid here. I'm going to start here in the top left-hand corner of one of these black blocks. I'm going to drag the selection until we get to basically the same pixel on a different part of the image. And I want to go an even number across. So go black, white, black, white, black, white, black, white, black, white. So now if we tile, now this is really hard for me to do without pointing at it. So if we tile horizontally now, that will just produce that black, white strip forever. Okay? So if I drag, but if we tile vertically, it would just be black and white strips, right? So if I drag down, now it will tile correctly. So it will go black, white, like a chessboard, which is the effect that we're looking for. So long as I'm here and I go to the equivalent point, so we'll just, would be the equivalent part, right? That square now that I've selected will tile correctly and create the whole image of carbon fibre. Right. Now, if we were here in the room, that is a weird concept, okay? That idea of how you've got to isolate and identify whether it's going to tile correctly. So I'd be like, does everybody get that? Does everybody understand that? And then I'd have to like coach people to say yes in the class, because nobody in the session ever likes saying yes. But I do need to double check whether anybody actually has understood or followed along with what we've done. So regardless of whether you're following along physically in Photoshop or whether you're just watching and going like, okay, I get it, does what I've just done make sense? Does that idea of tiling make sense? Just like whoever's first off the bat, if a couple of people can hit me with a yes, or, and this is also crucial, a what the heck, WTH, okay? If it doesn't make sense, if you're not quite sure what I mean, hit me with that. This is unfortunately the nature of this, and unless you guys can like teleport your eyes live into my shed, there's going to be a little bit of a delay whilst we catch up. A couple of people on the Discord, yes, I'm glad, yes, Yosho and Amelia, you're winning. I'm happy that provided you two understand, it's all been worth it. So however you select your settings like this. This square now that I've got here, selected with the marching ants around the outside, this is going to form my pattern. And so what we can do is we can save that so that we can use it throughout the document or even in other documents. So if you go to, whenever you've got a selection like this, making sure that we've got this layer, which I named as soon as I brought it in. As soon as we've got that done and selected, I'm going to click Edit, Define Pattern, right? So when I click on this, it will show me that little grid and it'll ask me to rename it. Now I'm going to call it Carbon New. You probably will never ever see that name again. I don't think I've ever. It's just in case you need to search for these things. So I'm going to click OK. Fine. So that looks like it's disappeared. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to click Edit, Fill, and we get this option here. Basically, fill by default, probably yours will say either foreground color, background color, content aware, but I want to select pattern. And I want to select this. And you'll see this is the one that we've added at the bottom. You notice I've actually got quite a few other weird textures and carbon fibers and stuff that I've done in the past. But I want this one just here because it's scaled perfectly for this. I'm going to click this so that it's highlighted and then click OK. That, oh, of course there would. This new version of Photoshop that I'm not used to using has of course got extra settings that I don't really want to know about. What the heck's going on with this? Let me just double check that I've said the right things, because the last thing I want to do is tell you something that is not useful for fill. Oh, there was just filled this. I just had script brick fill selected, and I don't want that. I just want pattern. Click OK, boom. And so now we've got this infinite tiling pattern. Problem, of course, being that because there was a very slight gradient across it, we've got these sort of striations that are running between the different blocks, so it looks a little bit sketchy. Just going to real quick try selecting a much smaller tile like this. Fill, pattern. Okay, that one worked better. So rather than using a larger square, just use the smallest possible square, and we've got this lovely infinite carbon fiber texture, which I can now set to overlay. And by setting it to overlay, we get this beautiful carbon fiber texture going over the top of our, I'll get there, come on Phil, these words exist, over the shape of the frame. I did it, I said the words. And by using that tiling texture, obviously we can now create this shape that fills everything. I'm just going to sharpen that a little bit to make it pop slightly more. So we've got a lovely carbon fiber texture. We've also got the shape and the gloss of the frame underneath. So it looks nice. You've got a bunch of people dropping in on the chat on Facebook, YouTube rather. That's good to William, Jacob, Robin, Andre, quarantine and chill. Okay. Yeah, well, it's good that you're here. Thank you very much. We'll chill later, I'm sure. What I need to do though is, because it actually looked very flat, we know we can add the mask to this, but the texture looks very flat. We talked before about when you're using a repeating texture or a very directional texture, if it doesn't support the geometry of the shape, it can look slightly false and slightly artificial. So I can create a mask around this, but it won't necessarily look right. So there's a method that we can use to distort this texture in a way that is sensitive to the geometry of the shape that we've created. When it works, it looks great. It's a bit of a faff, okay, and it's a hack, which is kind of like an old school way of doing things in Photoshop. Eh? Nowadays, in Photoshop, there's lots of tools that do the exact thing that you want it to do. But back in the olden days, when you used to use Photoshop, everything was a hack. So if you wanted to do almost anything, there'd be like about 3 extra steps, and you'd have to cheat and trick it into using a feature that's not supposed to do something to do that. So this is probably one of the hackiest things that we're going to do. So make sure you've got your carbon texture layer selected and click Filter, Filter Gallery. And we're going to get our filter gallery thing up here. Now these things just here are all these, like, if you want to make it look like it's a sort of stamp or like a watercolor or it's been drawn with a pen or something like that. This is where you would do that. So these can be quite nice for doing some, well, sometimes. Is it nice? I don't know. Some of them are cheesy. Almost all of them are cheesy. But the one that we want to select is the one that's called glass. Okay, so if you click on Distort on the drop down, it's the one in the middle called glass. Now, you'll notice that it makes this texture look like just double wibbly wobbly just here. Because what it does is, it uses like an alpha channel, an overlay, and it uses that as a basis to distort the texture. And by default, the one that it uses is a kind of frosted glass version. So it looks like you're looking through the frosted glass of somebody's toilet or bathroom. You know, when you're up against the frosted glass of someone's bathroom trying to look through like this, it all looks distorted inside. It's like that. But we don't want it to look frosted because this bike isn't made out of frosted glass, probably. So what we're going to do, instead of dropping down one of these options here, blocks it could be, or canvas, we're going to click on this little drop down just here, and we're going to click Load Texture. And what this is going to let us do is it's going to let us load a texture in that is going to form the basis for this transformation. And lo and behold, here on my desktop, there's a file called Frame for Transform, which if I import, has got the exact right distortion on, because of how we brought that in. And so what you'll see it doing is, it's distorting on the basis of where it's light and where it's dark on the texture. So it compresses in the dark section. Amelia says it's wibbly wobbly, it looks like static. Okay, so what you want to do is make sure that you've got scaling set to 100, and you're just going to have to jiggle around some of these settings just here until you want. Because what we're looking for is, I'm looking for the front section of the bike to be flat, because if you can imagine you're looking at the carbon fibre texture, it's going to be the classic carbon fibre texture. And as it recedes to the edge, that texture is going to become progressively more and more compressed. Okay, so it becomes more compressed as it goes along, and that's what's going to make it look like it's a three-dimensional shape. So I'm going to just find what I think is an okay sort of balance for this. And then I'm going to click OK. It's just, I might have gone the wrong way. Let me just Z that. Filter gallery. Let's just load it up again. This is one of those things where you kind of have to maybe do it a couple of times to get your head around exactly how it's doing it. Oh, I see what it's weirdly offset the distortion. So what I'm looking for is, I knew that it was doing it correctly, that it was compressing at the edges, but it was expanding in the center, but it was slightly offset. So if you have got the wrong effect, it may be that you have to drag your texture out. Now you can see what it's done. Hopefully you can see that it's worked quite nicely, that we've got, when it's in place, we've got the main texture just here, and then as we come to the edge, the texture is increasingly compressed. So let me just step back, filter gallery, increase the distortion and increase the smoothness. Okay. It's weird. I'm not sure why it's doing the offset there, which is not really great for me to be here explaining how to use this, and I don't understand why it's done something, but I think that it looks pretty good. It certainly looks like that texture is a part of that surface, rather than being completely separate. We have got this lovely curve shape here. So I think that looks nice. I think that looks really suave. But again, because there's a whole bunch of clicking involved, what I'd like is, if anybody has been following along, if you can just hit me with a yes. Hopefully you guys who are following along have got something that looks sort of similar to this. If that's the case, drop me a yes, thumbs up, okay. And I'm just going to pick up the transparency, the outline from the frame. You guys remember how we do that. If you hold down Control on the keyboard and hover over the thumbnail for a layer, you see that there is around the, next to the cursor, I mean, I'm pointing at my screen, but it doesn't really, it's up there somewhere, a little marquee next to it. When you click on that, you see that it takes the outline for that layer and converts it into a selection. So if I've got that selection from here, yes, Amelia's giving me a thumbs up, that's ideal. If I outline that selection just here, click on carbon fiber texture layer, and then click on this button here. So this button here is the make layer mask button. I hit that, and what it does is, you can see that it's masked out the texture, so that texture is now only applying to our bike frame. Bike frame looks pretty cool, I reckon. Now I'm just gonna go into image for the, actually click on the layer rather than the mask for the texture, image, adjustments, levels, and I can adjust the actual carbon fiber texture so that it is the right kind of brightness for a carbon fiber. That's a bit better. Does that look more like carbon fiber? Yeah, it's just a bit darker, isn't it? Because carbon fiber is generally a bit sort of graphite-y black. Nice, that looks good. So we've got our lovely carbon fiber texture. We've got this beautiful sort of organic flowing frame. We've not had to paint anything. You guys know that I love using the airbrush tool. Use it all the time to get a real nice sense of depth with these things. But we've not had to use it because we've just used a bunch of tricks and we've got this nice, organic, three-dimensional looking shape. And like I said, it's just hacks. We've used a bunch of hacks to do this. What it doesn't do is this shape does not respect the full geometry of the bike. So for example, the gear and the chain and the pedal for the bike IRL is in front of the frame. So what we're going to do is we're going to have to mask the frame, but we need to mask the frame and the texture, and we need to do it So basically, if I clicked on the frame here and added a layer mask to that, it would think that we're working on the outline, and it would change how the layer effect is working, how the shine is working. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the carbon fiber texture and the frame. So they're both selected, and I'm going to stick them in a group. So both selected, click on this, create new group at the bottom. So they're now in this, I'm going to call that frame total. So they're both in this folder. You guys know if we click on the little drop down, we've got these both split out like this. Now what's nice about this is you can treat individual groups as though it was a single layer, which means we can mask the whole group, and it masks it kind of separately from the layers. So the layer effects all exist inside the group, and we can then create a mask. So what I want to do is I'm just going to reduce the opacity. I'm going to click on the photo, and I'm going to try and make a selection that is just the just this sprocket here. So I'm going to reduce the size of the brush. And remember, if I paint black onto this layer mask, then it basically masks the, come on Phil, words exist. It masks the bit that's black on the layer mask. Shows the bit that's black, masks the, wait, no, it masks the white bit. Christ, this is just doing my nut in. Right, we got there, those words all came out. So, okay, good job, Phil. The frame goes now behind, more or less, this this bit of the bike, the chain and everything. But of course, I've also masked out this bit in the center, which really I want to be able to see the bike through. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the quick selection tool. On the photo layer. Quick selection tool is the dirty way of making these selections. Okay, so it's a bit of a hack, it's a cheat. It's not as effective as manually doing this. If this was a commercial piece of work that I was doing where it was going to be in print, or whether I got paid determined on it looking like maximum suave and as slick as possible, I would probably manually do this. So go in and create a path set that has got this selection on it. But because very little focus is going to be on this section, on this actual piece, I'm just going to make sure that I've got it more or less correct now. So I've got those bits selected. If I fill those sections with white on the layer mask, obviously the bike goes behind, the the frame goes behind that section. There's still a bit of haloing from the, I mean, I've picked a bad example because the bike itself, the frame that's in place, is a ridiculous colour, but it's fine, it should be fine. I'm actually going to make a small change on the actual bike frame. Large soft edge brush, reduce the opacity, and I'm literally just going to add a little bit of shadow on so that That's a bit annoying, sorry, my mistake. Right, what time is it? Okay, my brain is completely shot. It's an hour and a quarter in. I'm going to lock the layer transparency so I don't accidentally paint off the edge of it. Just to add a little bit of shadow into that. So it works nicely for that. So click Control S. So now we've got our lovely carbon fibre frame looking okay. It looks pretty good. Now, what I would do, again, if this was, I mean, I've deliberately drawn a frame that overlaps the original frame so that I wouldn't have to mask it out. If there was a point where, say for example, this frame was much thinner just here, so it came in, obviously because we're completely occluding this original frame, you could just literally paint it out like this. And in fact, there is a section where it doesn't overlap completely correctly. So I can paint that out so that there's no overlap. And even use the clone tool to cheat these sections. But realistically, this isn't something that's necessary to do. It's just a, call it gilding the lily sometimes. You've spent a lot of time working on something that looks really nice and you just get sucked into like making it look even better. So hopefully if you guys have been able to follow along with this, and what we should have ended up with is going from having this very basic bike, creating an overlay like this. So we use the path tool to draw the shape. We have used the that same outline and layer effects to create this sort of glossy three-dimensional shape. And we've also used this carbon fibre texture over the top. We went through making a sort of a tiled texture using the carbon fibre, which allowed us to create a much larger texture. And then we went in and used the texture, like the shape that we'd made earlier, the frame for transform, and used that as a basis using the glass tool to distort the texture so that it feels more like it conforms to the thing. It's like a whole load of different bits and pieces that, like I said, are kind of like tricks. So we've not really done any painting. We've not had to think about the shape of this too much in terms of making it look three-dimensional. But relatively easily, we've been able to create this sort of very nice finish. And the goal with all of these, remember, is not just to make something that looks nice. It's not necessarily just to make it look photographic. Our goal when we're doing stuff like this as product designers is to be able to communicate to somebody else what the shape is. So on its own, this piece of artwork is nothing, okay? It would be a step along the way to creating the actual frame. So if you were working at a company that manufactures frames like this, and you had like, this is how I think this thing is going to look, and you've got to get people, like stakeholders, to come on board and like, yes, we're okay that, we're going to put it into production, start making the molds, then this would be the kind of thing that you create. Or if you wanted to go from, sometimes you have something which is a very technical series of drawings or technical specifications, like the DWG files for cutting or something like that, but you need to have a visual to explain to somebody who is going to be technically manufacturing something, like, follow all of these guides, but have in mind this is how it should look. So a piece of artwork like this, in isolation, feels like it exists just so you can show off your Photoshop skills, which is fine. Obviously, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that, and for a lot of people, maybe it is. But have in mind that the reason for any piece of artwork like this is a construct with a purpose, and that purpose is communicating what shape it is. So as a very quick way of visualizing things like this is a great way of doing it. What's quite nice about this is if you had 5 or 6 different like frame layouts that you wanted to visualize, you would not have to do this whole process 5 or 6 times. You would lay out the bike 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times on the page, draw the frames on a single layer, and then because everything is being done sort of automatically, once you've created the frames for transform and exported that, when you apply that layer effect that gives it that sort of sense of depth, of course it's going to apply it to all of the different frames that are on that layer. So you can visualize them all simultaneously, and then every process that we've done would apply to every single one of the ones on the layer. So it's an extremely fast way of creating visuals for a bunch of different variations, if that makes sense. Does that make sense? Just hit me with a yes somewhere on either our lovely Discord chat or here on the YouTubes. And we'll show you perhaps another couple of bits that don't necessarily apply to this, but is everything going okay? We've got a stack of people who've just dropped in. Ryan Lai, yo, WYS fam, oi man like LY, yeah, my guys. God damn, I'm so old. I feel like loading up a little translator or something so I understand what the heck is going on. But listen, it's nice that you're here, that's what's important. This is the worst angle for making me feel old though. Look at this, it's a disaster. Also, the way that my camera blows it out makes it look like it's like extra shiny. Sometimes just, guys, you just get old. What can you do? You're young one day, and then the next day, you're old. Yosho98 says, yes. Yosho, if you've come with me on this journey, it's all been worth it. Yes, sir, says a man with a Korean name. Thank you. So the texture that we just created in terms of making the making the bike look a particular way was like a repeating texture. So it's very easy to make something like carbon fiber into a tiling texture. And what's nice about these things, I've talked to you guys before about, like, you create a swipe file, you end up with, like, I don't have to make a carbon fiber texture now because I've got a bunch of different carbon fiber textures that I've used for previous projects. And as you start working and as you guys create this swipe file and content, you end up with like an archive of things that you found useful in the past. So you know that you can make something look like it's made out of carbon fiber very easily. But sometimes, and this is going to be a stupid texture that we're going to use, okay, but I want to use it just so that I can show you guys how to make it look. Let's say, instead of having a repeating texture like this, I want to have like a polystyrene texture. Like this, for example. Well, actually, no, not that one, because that's from a stock photo thing. Let's just find a nice high-res one. Image size, extra large. Wow, they're almost all of them are from stock photo sites. Cool, let's just check this one out. No, that's from stock photo site. No. Bop. Right. That one's fine. This will do for our purposes. I'm just going to copy this. Drop back in here. Wow, that is way too big. Going to shrink that down. In fact, what I want to do with this, just copy that. I'm going to make a new file and paste it in place just here. So rather than working inside the document, I'm creating a new file, a new document. I'm just going to set auto contrast on this. Adjust the level so it looks a little bit more like polystyrene. So this isn't just necessarily a polystyrene technique, this is just for any time you want to create a tiling texture out of something that doesn't necessarily tile. So I'm just going to select a section of this. And I'm going to crop that in, so click image crop. So if I were to create a pattern out of this now, it wouldn't tile because the edges don't match. And I can demonstrate that by if I just drag this across, hold down Alt and then drag it the other way, the seam, which was at the side, is now in the center. And you can see that there is a very definite seam down the center, which looks weird. So in order for this to tile, we would have to get rid of that seam. So what I've done is, just to recap, I've got cropped in section of this. Brian Lai. Ah, crap. I thought this was business management. Peace out, broski. If he got this far in it, business management, he really does need to attend. And I'm going to hold down Alt. Remember, Alt, when you click and drag, will duplicate a layer. Alt and Shift the other way. So it's still dead horizontal. And I'm going to jig it left and right with the cursor keys so that it's dead center and that it is an exact match. I'm going to click Control E. That will flatten these two layers down into a single layer. So you can see here that I've only got one layer. Right. What I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of that seam. Because if you think about it, by putting this seam in the center, the edges now will be perfect tile. Because this used to be in the middle, and this used to be in the middle, which means that they will tile perfectly. Does that make sense? So I'm going to use the clone tool here, the stamp tool. So what the stamp tool does, in case you guys don't know, is it's like a brush. You hold down Alt and click somewhere. So let's say we click just here. When you let go, it paints using that section of the image. So as you can see that there's a little cross as well as where the brush is. And now it's painting the image from where the cross is, where the brush is. And by using that, I can paint one section of the image into a completely different section of the image. M. Rumi Latif A says, yes, you are back. I guess you could say I'm back. So what we've got now is, if you look, because I've painted that in place, where there was a hard line down the center, now that line is gone, which means that this image will now tile perfectly horizontally. So I'm just going to neaten that up a little bit. So let me just make sure that that's cropped. So no gap down the middle. So there's no tiling seam down the middle. And now if I drag these across, there's no tiling seam there either. So if I were only to tile this horizontally now, this will tile perfectly. It's seamless. And you'll see that term used a lot. So sometimes you can just Google seamless polystyrene texture and you'll just get one. But sometimes there might be a texture of something you've made or a texture you've found. You take a photograph with your phone and you're like, nah, I wish that I could make that particular texture so that I can use it in Photoshop. Or, and this is one of the things that you might find useful, these seamless textures work really nicely when you use them to layer texture onto your CAD models as well. And this is the exact technique that a lot of CAD artists will use to create those textures. So we've got our horizontal tiling sorted. That's fine. This is definitely going to tile horizontally now, but it will not tile vertically. because we've not done that. So all we're going to do is we're going to repeat the process. Hold down Shift and drag down. Hold down Alt and Shift and drag up to create a new layer. And what it does is it centers the seam. So let me just make sure that that is pixel perfect. So it's pixel on pixel. There's no seam in the middle, apart from this horrible, dirty visual seam here. So I click Control E. We've got a single layer, and I'm going to use this clone tool again. To try and identify sections of the image that I can use to create this seamless effect. Now hopefully, if we get this looking about right, there is very little seam in the middle there that looks, but it's a little bit of pixel mess from where we've used the different bits and pieces. But overall, I think that it's quite good. It seems to work okay. It still reads as the kind of polystyrene that I want it to read as. But it now should tile perfectly vertically and horizontally. The only thing that you sometimes get is a little weird bit in the middle, but because of the way that this texture works, we've not ended up with that. So we've got our perfect, seamless polystyrene texture. Now, what we do now, click Control A so that we select the entire artboard of this seamless texture. Mr. Rumi Latif A says, please make more videos, sir. Your video is very helpful for a student like me. Well, we've been forced into this situation where, well, listen, forced. I'm going to be hopefully doing some more lives like this. And if there's something that anybody in particular wants to cover in a future session, just type it in on here on YouTube or on the Discord. We'll do what I can to cover it. Anyway, so we've got a texture here, Control A, exact same thing that we did with the carbon fiber earlier on. Edit, define pattern, seamless polystyrene. Now we just drop into our bike here, make a new layer, and just edit, fill, pattern. We've got a polystyrene texture just here. Click OK. Boom. And so you can see that there is a sort of a repeating content to it, so that there's still, you can see like this, that there's a sort of grid to it. But it still has quite a nice sort of feeling to it. So let's, since we've got it, let's try applying our distortion to it. Has that worked? Yeah, do you know what? That has kind of worked. So now we've got, Christ, for whatever reason, a nice polystyrene bike frame. So I realised that perhaps because it's a little bit more freeform, you guys perhaps haven't necessarily followed along with making the texture like that. But at least does that texture approach make sense? Again, if anybody's, wait, no, I don't fully understand it, there's not going to be a chance after I sign off from this for you guys to ask me about it. So does it make sense? Have you guys found that useful in some way? Does it? The ultimate goal for all of this, obviously, because I'm not on site, is to provide as much sort of useful help as I can for all of this. So if if anybody doesn't get it, just hit me with a no, either in YouTube or on the Discord. Here's a mad idea. If you are following along with this, I think there's 2 or 3 people who are following along with this. If you're on either the Discord or if you're on the Product Design 2017 Facebook group, if you could take a screenshot or even just click, you know, select your thing, Control-Shift-C so that you copy it flat, and just paste that in. I would just love to see whether or not anybody's been able to follow along with this. I'm not gonna call anybody out and say like, "Oh, you got this wrong," but IRL, were I on site with you guys, I would be able to circle round and be able to sort of peer into your computer screens. So if anybody has got it, one person has said that they picked up a few little things that would really help in the future. So anything like this, as always, is a combination of lots of little like tricks and hacks and ways of doing things in Photoshop. I'm sure that if you watch other tutorials on Photoshop, if you develop your own way of working, you'll find other ways of doing things other than like the Phil Smith way of doing it. But as with all stuff in Photoshop, there's a lot of different ways of doing everything. So no matter what you're going to be trying to create, what kind of visual you want to create, you're going to find your own way of doing it. You'll be like, oh, I've got this way of doing it. Hopefully, using and understanding a bunch of the different tricks like this, I still think that the main way to work is either on screen or on a pad to draw what you're going to work on, bring it into either Photoshop, or if you're working in something else, Procreate or Sketchbook or something like that, use that, and that your like hand skills and drawing skills and being able to use the airbrush and render things like that, they are the most important skills. They have primacy. They are the things that will be most flexible. And the reason is, if you know every trick in Photoshop, and then you go somewhere where they're like, we only use Sketchbook Pro, all of your tricks are now worth not a lot. Whereas if you know how to paint and draw as your main core skills in Photoshop, when you go somewhere where they're like, we only use Procreate or we only use Sketchbook, then those are transferable skills in a way that using like tips and tricks aren't. The tips and tricks are really useful, but they don't always translate as being the most important things. Someone's typing. It's so tantalizing when I see someone typing. Just press return. We'll be there in a sec. If you are following along with this asynchronously, so if you're following along and you're not just following along live now on the 17th, just coming up to lunchtime, do a screenshot of your work, take a copy and paste it. I won't lie, I fell behind following along, but I will be going back over it. It will be useful for future. Guys, if you do get stuck, if you're just like, wait, he's going too fast, if you just say, hold on a sec, pause, I am literally here for you, especially if you're in the Discord chat, you are what I'm doing this for. If you get stuck doing it at a later date, you're watching back through and be like, wait, he well skipped over that, didn't make any sense. If you ask questions on the YouTube channel, I'm going to keep checking that for a bit. Obviously, you can watch back over this later on. So if there's something you skipped, I'll try and answer any questions that pop up in the YouTube chat. If you do try this again, it would be great to see your screenies or like some pictures of the bike on either post into the Discord if you guys are on the Discord. If you're on the Facebook group, you can paste it directly onto the Facebook group. Just at the bottom of the announcement that I made with the video, I'll put a picture of this one up so you guys can look through it. If you guys are my students, then you probably have got, you know what the link is for my G Drive folder. So I'm going to put this file in the G Drive folder so you can have a look at how it's built. if that's going to be useful at all. And I think that that's about it. We've done 94 minutes of stream. This is the first time we've done one of these, so maybe it feels like it's a little bit experimental. So if anybody has had any technical problems, not necessarily that they're just like, I don't understand what he was talking about. If the video didn't work particularly well, if there were some streaming problems, or there was buffering and it paused, or just you couldn't follow along, then let me know, either through any one of the normal methods. If you send me an email or on the Discord, then that will be extremely useful, because then I'll be able to diagnose and hopefully make sure that this doesn't happen again. If everything's run smoothly for you, let me know that, because then I'll know that you're not just like, I didn't bother to post. If there's a problem with the volume, if you need to be louder, or if it didn't make any sense, because I can see from this end, I can see that the YouTube app is running and it makes it look like everything's okay. And we've had some comments, so hopefully people have been able to follow along. But moving forward, in order for me to be able to do this again and for it to work properly, just feedback and let me know. Because I'm not going to be on site at the university for the immediate future, if you have any questions, not just about this that we've just run through, this very specific set of nonsense, but if there's some other technical problem, if you've got a question about your portfolio, if there's something about presentation, if there's any kind of 2D presentation content that you want me to help with, where you get stuck with it, or you're not sure, Photoshop, Illustrator, InDesign, any of those kind of things, then either send me an email. You guys have got my email address. If you've not, then you can ask Matt or Tom or Kieran or whoever. The Discord is going to stay open. We're going to keep using that as a basis for this, so announcements on that. I'll keep checking that. It pings on my phone. So if you've got a question, then I can ideally go through that. Right, now the other thing about the Discord is, because we can do screen share conversations on that, if you want to book or arrange an individual tutorial where you've got something specific that you want to know, or if you want to walk through something, if you either email me or contact me on Discord, then we can use that and we can kind of do like a one-on-one in the same way that I would if it was at the university, and we'll be able to do all of that. So hopefully that makes sense. If you've been watching live, thank you very much for watching. If you've been watching in the future, then I don't know, look, normally I'd say all like the monetized stuff, but like and share this video, subscribe, hit the notification button, like I'm flipping PewDiePie or something. Because these are university projects, I'm not going to monetize these videos, although it's so tempting to do so. Just leave me a comment down in the bottom below, and we'll be doing some more of these very soon. And that's about it. Thank you very much for tuning in. Hopefully, like I said, I'll see you guys soon. Stay safe in these confusing, troubling times. It's a great opportunity for you guys to knuckle down, get properly stuck in, learning some drawing, learning some new Photoshop skills. And that's it. I stop talking now. Bye-bye.